Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely monumental achievement of perseverance, autonomy, and cultural pride. We are talking about Eatonville, Florida, the very first, the nation's oldest Black incorporated municipality.
And, looking at it, it really makes you wonder, how exactly did a group of newly freed African Americans build a thriving, independent society from the absolute ground up? And maybe even more fascinating, how did that unique environment of profound independence end up shaping one of America's greatest literary voices, Zora Neale Hurston? Well, let's trace that journey.
Because appearances today can be super deceiving. If you drive through Eatonville now, nestled right between Maitland and Winter Park, you'll see modern municipal buildings, brick intersections, bustling roads surrounded by the usual Orlando sprawl. But back in the mid-19th century, this was completely unsettled frontier. We're talking dense, heavy thickets of pine and palmetto scrub. Uninhabited wilderness where literally rattlesnakes vastly outnumbered the human settlers. It was a total blank slate, but one that required an immense amount of grit to tame.
Let's move to Section 1, the struggle for autonomy.
To really get what Eatonville means, you have to look at the sheer momentum of constitutional freedom happening at the time. Following the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, we get this rapid-fire ratification of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. And when you combine those huge legal milestones with the 1866 Southern Homestead Act, which offered cheap public land to poor blacks and whites, it sparked this powerful, widespread desire among newly freed African Americans to just go out and create their own independent towns.
So, roughly 400. That is how many Black towns, settlements, and enclaves organized across the country between 1865 and 1900. 400 attempts at building a safe haven. But, as you can imagine, trying to build a municipality from scratch without funding or materials is incredibly tough. In fact, fewer than 150 of those attempts actually overcame the obstacles to become legally recognized municipalities.
And part of why it was so tough is that those initial federal promises pretty quickly dissolved into severe, localized racial prejudice. Basically, a massive bait and switch. The federal government initially tried to help break cycles of debt through the Freedmen's Bureau. But actually, by 1869, the Bureau was already dissolved. Former Confederates swept back into power in local governments, they took over police forces, and they started passing these oppressive black codes specifically to limit freedmen's rights. So right out of the gate, the dream of independence was under heavy siege.
Which brings us to Section 2, founding a Black utopia.
Despite all those massive systemic setbacks, the drive for independence persevered. So how did they actually do it? Well, initially, local white landowners absolutely refused to sell land to black folks. But in 1882, Josiah Eaton and a New York philanthropist named Lewis Lawrence finally stepped up. By 1885, Joseph E. Clark, who would go on to be the town's founding father and its second mayor, managed to secure a 12-acre tract. And Clark was just relentless. He kept buying more land, organizing the community, until August 1887, when 27 African-American men stood together and unanimously voted to incorporate 112 acres. And just like that, they officially established the oldest all-black town in the United States. No way around it, that is a historic triumph.
And they knew it too. Just listen to this pitch from 1889, right on the front page of their own newspaper, the Eatonville Speaker. They boldly advertised a working alternative for freedmen living in oppressive communities, declaring it a Negro city governed by Negroes. They were basically broadcasting to the entire nation, hey, we actually built a safe haven. It's fully operational, it's affordable, and we are entirely in charge.
And they made absolutely sure it was attainable. Mayor Clark and the early developers were selling plots for just $35 cash. To put that into perspective, that is an incredibly accessible price point for owning your own private property back then. Families would often buy up multiple lots just so they could subsistence farm, basically guaranteeing their own food security. It was brilliant. Word of mouth and these newspaper ads spread like wildfire across the South.
Moving on to Section 3, building self-sufficiency and education.
Because, getting the land is one thing, but building a working economy, that's a whole different beast. But this rapidly growing economy proved they could make the town completely self-sustaining. They weren't just surviving, they were building a real microeconomy. They had their own storekeepers, their own builders, cobblers, the whole shebang. They fished the nearby lakes, irrigated their crops, and integrated into the broader regional economy too, working in the citrus groves and actually helping build the railroad lines connecting Central Florida to Jacksonville. But of course, you can't have true, long-lasting independence without passing down knowledge. Education was the absolute pillar of their autonomy. In 1899, Russell and Mary Calhoun, who had actually studied at the famous Tuskegee Institute, founded the Robert Hungerford Industrial School.
And it didn't just teach reading and writing. It was completely focused on practical traits, teaching kids crop management, poultry raising, and financial skills, so the next generation would be entirely self-reliant.
And get this, 62%. That is the amount of the town's total area that the school eventually grew to encompass, 340 acres. It wasn't just a single schoolhouse, it became this massive physical and cultural institution with dormitories, barns, and massive garden plots, all dedicated to empowering Eatonville's youth.
All right, Section 4, Inspiring Zora Neale Hurston.
So, what does all this civic history mean for American literature today? Well, we can draw a direct, undeniable line from Eatonville's political and economic independence to the powerful themes of autonomy in Zora Neale Hurston's writings. For her, Eatonville wasn't just a quaint backdrop. It was literally the soil that grew her worldview. It proved that civic self-governance directly nurtures creative self-determination.
I mean, imagine growing up as a black child in the American South at that time, but inside this utopian bubble. Hurston considered Eatonville her true hometown. Because she was totally insulated from the typical racial oppression that was actively crushing spirits everywhere else, she felt empowered to write stories that centered on community triumph rather than just racial trauma. Growing up seeing black mayors, black store owners, and black landowners directly fueled the incredibly vibrant characters in her masterpiece. Their eyes were watching God. Eatonville proved to her firsthand that autonomy wasn't just a pipe dream, it was a lived reality.
Finally, let's hit Section 5, Preserving a Cultural Legacy.
Fast forward to today, and despite the creeping, really aggressive suburban sprawl of the greater Orlando metropolis, Eatonville is still here. It proudly maintains its identity as a vital piece of African American history. By fighting to secure its status as a National Historic District, the town built a crucial shield against overdevelopment. Today, you can go visit the Zora Neale Hurston Museum, or you can attend the Zora Festival, which, by the way, brings thousands of people from all over the world every single year to celebrate the arts right where this history was made.
So I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to chew on. How do we ensure that historic cultural sanctuaries like Eatonville are protected from just being swallowed up by modern suburban sprawl? As cities keep expanding and property values soar, preserving these totally unique histories requires our active attention and advocacy. Eatonville isn't just some story from the past. It's a living testament to self-determination that really demands to be protected for the future. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.